They stand at the altar. She's radiant, confident, 32. He's graying, calm, 54, a presence more than a person. You can feel the murmurs in the crowd, the questions, the quiet judgment. Why him? Why her? It's a scene that both confuses and captivates us, because somewhere deep down, we recognize it. It touches something primal, a truth that polite society refuses to name. When a woman over 30 chooses a man 20 years older, the world rushes to label it gold digger, daddy issues, midlife crisis. But these are lazy answers, caricatures of something far more intricate. What if it isn't greed, but gravity? What if she isn't chasing money, but safety? And what if he isn't exploiting youth, but searching for meaning in a world that forgot him? This story, this pattern, is not new. It's ancient, written into our biology, shaped by our traumas, refined by our societies. But in the age of hyper-independence and collapsing gender myths, the dynamics have changed. Today, the woman over 30 often stands at a crossroads: success, loneliness, the ticking clock of both biology and purpose. And the man over 50? He's seen the world break promises, yet still believes he can offer something real. Psychologists call this phenomenon life stage compensation. When one partner's chaos seeks the other's calm. It's not always conscious. It's often the subconscious trying to complete a cycle it once left open. In that sense, every relationship is a form of healing or a form of hiding. The question is, which one is this? In Depth Realm, we don't chase shallow answers. We dive. Because behind this choice lies a hidden architecture of emotion, trauma patterns, power exchange, and psychological symmetry. Two lives, balancing what the other lost. Over the next few chapters, we'll go beneath the surface, into attachment wounds, erotic safety, status psychology, and the social masks we wear to justify what we desire. But first, we start where all human choices begin, with the wounds that made us who we are. Rule card 1. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with what we lack. And if that's true, then her choice, his presence, their union, may not be madness. It may be memory. Every choice in love begins long before we ever meet the person. It begins in childhood, in the quiet spaces between affection and absence. When a woman over 30 chooses an older man, she's not just choosing comfort. She may be choosing correction. A subconscious attempt to rewrite the story that once broke her. Psychology calls it repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to replay an old emotional wound in the hope that this time, it ends differently. It's not manipulation. It's memory trying to heal. Maybe her father was distant, the kind of man who worked too much, promised to show up, but never did. Now she finds herself drawn to a man who feels stable, steady, predictable. Someone who stays. Someone who doesn't run when she becomes difficult or vulnerable. And for him, perhaps he once loved a woman who drained him with youth's chaos, the volatility, the power games, the ego clashes. Now, in her, he sees calm, depth. A woman who knows the cost of emotion. It's not romance. It's resonance. Two broken frequencies finding harmony, at least for a while. Attachment theory helps explain it. Anxious partners crave security. Avoidant partners crave control. Older men often signal emotional safety. Younger women, vitality and admiration. When those needs meet, it can feel divine, until the same wounds resurface under a different face. Imagine a woman named Elena, 33, successful, tired, carrying the invisible weight of always being the strong one. Then comes Michael, 55, a man who doesn't compete with her, he simply listens. She mistakes the calm for healing, not realizing that his stillness hides detachment. She pours her heart in, but his emotional rhythm is slower, colder, older. And soon, the dynamic flips. She becomes the one chasing the very security she thought she'd found. It's a cruel cycle, because our wounds don't just shape who we love. They decide how we love. Rule card 2. Unhealed wounds don't disappear. They disguise themselves as attraction. So, when she marries older, it isn't always about advantage. Sometimes, it's about unfinished business. And until both see it clearly, they'll confuse safety for love and familiarity for fate. But what does that safety really mean? Is it emotional stability or psychological dependency dressed in calm tones and expensive dinners? Let's go deeper. Let's examine what truly drives this connection, the promise of stability and the quiet fear that hides beneath it. Stability. It sounds noble, rational, the kind of word people use to justify their choices, especially when those choices make others whisper. But beneath that word lies an entire emotional economy, one built on fear, time, and survival. For many women over 30, life begins to narrow, not in ambition, but in margin for error. The pressure of biological timelines, the exhaustion of self-sufficiency, the fatigue of trying to be everything at once. And so, stability stops being a luxury. It becomes currency. An older man, then, represents something far more primal than wealth. He represents certainty, a steady hand in a storm that life never warned her about. This isn't about gold digging. It's about energy conservation. After years of emotional volatility, failed relationships, betrayal, disappointment, she learns that peace is priceless. And often, peace looks like a man who's done chasing chaos. Psychologically, this is called security-driven selection. When one partner prioritizes emotional predictability and resource safety over excitement or novelty. It's not shallow, it's adaptive. But the economics of care go both ways. For the older man, offering stability becomes his form of relevance. He may no longer compete on looks or energy, but he offers wisdom, structure, and the safety of someone who's already fought his wars. In her, he finds purpose again. In him, she finds rest. This is the invisible contract, the exchange between safety and significance. She softens because he's steady. He heals because she still believes he matters. Yet, like all contracts written in silence, it carries risk, because stability can slowly turn into control, and comfort can quietly become dependency. Picture this. She's 35, independent, but secretly craving exhale. He's 56, gentle, but proud of being her anchor. At first, she adores his composure, his patience, his guidance. But 1 year in, that same steadiness feels suffocating. She realizes that in exchange for peace, she gave up permission to grow. Rule card 3. What begins as safety often ends as surrender. It's not always love that traps us. Sometimes it's gratitude, because the one who rescued you becomes the one you fear losing most. But not every connection like this is a trap. Some transcend the contract. When both partners understand the difference between protection and possession. The question is, can stability coexist with desire? Can peace stay passionate? Or must one always kill the other? In the next descent, we uncover why maturity and eroticism aren't opposites, and how experience becomes its own kind of seduction. Experience. It's not just about age, it's about pattern recognition. A man who's lived enough to see through illusions, both his own and others. For a woman over 30, that kind of depth feels magnetic. Because she's no longer searching for butterflies, she's searching for resonance. And resonance doesn't come from chaos, it comes from understanding. Older men often carry that air, a quiet knowing, an ease in how they move through tension. They've failed, rebuilt, lost again, and learned the rhythm of life's impermanence. To a woman who's been emotionally weathered, that steadiness feels intoxicating. This isn't about daddy issues or cliches. It's about competence attraction, the psychological pull toward those who demonstrate control, mastery, and emotional composure. It's the mind's way of saying, here, you can rest. And there's an erotic element to that safety. Because when trust enters the room, inhibition leaves. When a woman feels seen without being judged, guided without being controlled, her defenses melt. Desire thrives not in mystery, but in security. That's the paradox most men miss. It's not wealth or looks that captivate her. It's emotional gravity. A man who can hold her chaos without trying to fix it. Who listens, not to reply, but to understand. That's the true eroticism of maturity. In psychological terms, this is tied to attachment calibration. A securely attached partner radiates safety through consistent, non-reactive behavior. That safety activates the opposite energy in her: freedom, playfulness, surrender. Because here's the truth: a woman's deepest attraction isn't to youth or rebellion. It's to presence. And presence is born only after the ego dies a few times. Rule card: for maturity isn't about age, it's about stillness. An older man who's done with proving himself doesn't compete. He creates space. And that space becomes the stage where feminine energy can finally perform without fear. But here's the twist: even this harmony can fracture. Because when the dynamic becomes too lopsided, when he always leads and she always follows, passion fades. Desire needs polarity, but love needs equality. So what happens when the man's experience starts turning into authority and her admiration begins to feel like submission? That's where our next descent leads. Into the thin line between mentorship and manipulation, and how power disguises itself as protection. Every bond has an invisible contract. Unspoken, unwritten, yet deeply felt. When a woman chooses a man much older, the contract often begins with safety. He protects. He guides. He stabilizes. But over time, that safety can shift. It can start to feel like ownership. Because every protector has the potential to become a possessor. And every act of care, if laced with control, turns love into quiet imprisonment. It starts subtly. He offers advice, not requests. He decides, not discusses. He uses phrases like, "I know what's best for you," or "You'll understand when you're older." The irony? She's no longer the young, naive girl he imagines, yet he still casts her in that role. This is psychological dominance disguised as devotion. And it often comes from fear, the man's fear of losing relevance, youth, or authority. So he compensates by defining her world. Psychologists call this benevolent control, the illusion of love as protection, when in truth, it's a slow erosion of autonomy. But why does she stay? Because the same qualities that once made him desirable, leadership, confidence, direction, are now the same chains that keep her tied. It's emotional conditioning. Through small reinforcements, approval when she conforms, withdrawal when she resists, she begins to internalize his perception of her. Her world shrinks to the size of his acceptance. And yet, she doesn't see it as manipulation. Not yet. Because he's not cruel. He's just concerned. He's just trying to help. He's just being protective. Rule card: 5. Control wears kindness like a mask. In relationships with strong age or power gaps, dependency loops often form. He becomes her anchor. She becomes his validation. He needs to feel needed. She needs to feel safe. And both mistake this mutual dependence for love. But love is freedom, not protection that limits. but presence that empowers. And yet, leaving such a dynamic is not easy. Because it's not just him she's walking away from. It's the identity she built under his shadow. In the next chapter, we descend into that identity crisis, when the woman begins to awaken and realizes the price of her comfort was her selfhood. Every illusion begins to crack, quietly. It never starts with a fight. It starts with a feeling. One day, she hears her own voice sound foreign to her. The way she laughs, a little restrained. The way she hesitates before speaking, waiting for his eyes to approve. It's not that he forbids her to be herself. It's that somewhere along the way, she forgot who herself even was. This is the awakening phase. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, when two truths collide in the mind, and one begins to suffocate the other. She still loves him, but she can't ignore the faint whisper that says, "This isn't me anymore." He's the stability she once prayed for. But now, that same stability feels like stillness, and stillness feels like decay. She starts noticing the world outside again. Other voices, other ideas, her own unspoken desires. And with every realization, a piece of her conditioning begins to loosen. But here's the paradox. The first stage of awakening often looks like guilt. Guilt for feeling restless. Guilt for wanting more. Guilt for questioning the man who once gave her everything. This guilt is the emotional residue of dependency. It's the mind punishing itself for craving freedom. So she tells herself she's ungrateful. That maybe she's the problem. That good women don't want more. But beneath the surface, something sacred is re-emerging. The self that remembers what she was before him. She begins to reclaim small things, the way she dresses, the music she listens to, her curiosity, her solitude, her voice. These small rebellions are acts of resurrection. And he senses it. He feels her slipping, not physically, but emotionally. So he tightens the invisible chain. More compliments mixed with caution. More affection mixed with authority. He reminds her of all he's done. He replays the past as proof that she owes him her peace. But the awakened mind cannot unsee truth. And once she realizes that safety without freedom is just another form of fear, the cycle begins to end. Rule card 6. Comfort can be the most elegant prison. The awakening isn't dramatic. It's not a scream. It's a quiet clarity, like the moment before dawn when the darkness begins to lose its power. But with clarity comes consequence. And the next choice she makes will define everything. Will she stay and fade, or walk away and rebuild? In the next chapter, we explore the transformation, how a woman who leaves this kind of bond redefines power, love, and her sense of self forever. When she finally walks away, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like loss. Not just of him, but of the identity that revolved around him. There's silence now. No one to text her good morning. No one to make decisions for her. No one to tell her what's best. Just her, and the echo of everything she silenced for years. But within that silence lies alchemy. Because transformation rarely begins with celebration, it begins with emptiness. She starts to rediscover herself piece by piece. Psychologists call this individuation, the process Carl Jung described as becoming whole again. It's not about becoming new. It's about remembering the fragments you buried to survive. She learns to trust her instincts again, to say no without guilt, to want without apology, to feel desire without seeking validation. At first, she mistakes loneliness for punishment. But soon, she realizes loneliness is just the sound of freedom before you learn its rhythm. She notices how her thoughts start to change, no longer centered on him, but on her own expansion. The books she reads, the boundaries she sets, The way she looks at the world, not through his lens, but through her own awakening perception. And here's the secret most people never talk about. When a woman reclaims her autonomy, she becomes magnetic. Not because she chases attention, but because she radiates self-possession. The same confidence she once sought in older men, she now finds in herself. That's when her attraction changes. She no longer seeks the man who has it all. She seeks the man who sees her all. Her definition of love evolves from dependency to resonance, from escape to embodiment. She realizes that maturity isn't measured by age, it's measured by awareness. And awareness changes everything. Rule card 7. You don't heal by finding someone new. You heal by finding yourself again. As she continues to grow, she begins to see the bigger picture, that this wasn't just her story. It's the story of countless women who mistook control for protection and validation for love. But now she's awake. And in her awakening, she carries a quiet power, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. Still, one question remains. If awareness frees you, why do so many people choose to stay asleep? In our final chapter, we explore the collective mirror, the hidden social and psychological mechanisms that keep these patterns alive across generations. Every story we've told, of love, of power, of protection, has roots deeper than we realize. Because the truth is, it's not just about her or him. It's about the world that shaped them both. From childhood, women are told to admire strength, but not their own. They're taught to find security in someone older, wiser, richer, someone who knows better. And men? They're told to seek youth, beauty, softness, not partnership, but proof of their status. This isn't coincidence. It's conditioning. For centuries, our stories, in films, in literature, even in fairy tales, have romanticized the imbalance. The older man who saves, the younger woman. The father figure disguised as a lover. The teacher who becomes the soulmate. It's the same pattern, repeated and polished until we call it romance instead of control. Psychologically, this is what Carl Jung called the collective shadow. It's the hidden, unspoken part of society that we pretend doesn't exist, but that still shapes every desire, every attraction, every expectation. We glorify the mentor archetype, the man who teaches her about life, about the world, about herself. But rarely do we question why she was never encouraged to learn those things on her own. It's subtle. It's everywhere. And it seeps into the psyche until it feels normal. The problem isn't love between different ages. It's the imbalance of power disguised as compatibility. When admiration turns into obedience. When guidance turns into dependency. When protection turns into possession. This is the hidden script, the one that keeps both men and women playing the same roles generation after generation. And most never realize it. Because the play feels familiar. It feels safe. But safety built on hierarchy isn't safety at all, it's submission. To break the pattern, both sides must awaken. Men must stop mistaking control for leadership. Women must stop mistaking comfort for connection. Because real love doesn't require power, it requires presence. And presence can only exist between equals. Rule card 8. The world romanticizes imbalance because equality terrifies it. Now imagine, what happens when two people meet, not to fill each other's voids, but to face their own? No masks. No games. Just raw consciousness meeting raw consciousness. That is the next evolution of love. And it starts with awareness. So, the next time someone tells you age doesn't matter, ask yourself, is it wisdom that attracts them? Or the illusion of control that comforts them? Because deep down, every relationship mirrors the mind that created it. And if you're here, listening to this, you've already stepped outside that illusion. You're watching it from the depths. Rule card. Final. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee the truth. This is depth realm, where we don't just analyze human psychology, we descend into it.